If you are a small to medium-sized business or a content creator with a small team, chances are you're going to need some way to communicate. That may be communicating internally with your other team members, or it may be communicating with your customers, your viewers, your clients, whatever the case is there. Now look, we all know that there are lots of different options out there as far as different ways that you can communicate, but sometimes the old tried and true methods really are the best. So what we're going to take a look at in today's video is a Docker container called Flarum. Now, if you're not familiar with what Flarum is, maybe you've never heard that name before, basically Flarum is just an easy to manage, easy to implement forum software. Now, if you'd like to follow along with this tutorial, be sure to head down to the link in the description because Linode is sponsoring this video. And in the description, you'll find a link to head over to Linode to get $100 in free credit to check out Linode for 60 days. So if we jump over to Flarum's website here at flarum.org, here we can see that it says Flarum at the top. It says forums made simple, modern, fast, and free. And we all like those words. So if we scroll down, we can kind of get a little picture example of what their forums look like. If we scroll down, we can get more information about that. It's extensible, meaning if you've got a developer on your team or you'd like to hire a developer, they've got kind of a system in the back where you can kind of build out additional functionality for your Flarum instance. They've got an elegant UI. It's mobile first, meaning that it will render very well on your mobile devices, whether that's a phone or a tablet, whatever the case is there. You can style it however you'd like using different methods. It is fast and light. It is secure. The security is while they've done everything on their end to make sure that their software is secure, there is still a certain amount of responsibility to whomever is deploying and managing this to make sure that they've done everything they can on their end for the sake of hosting security as well. We scroll down a little further in the page. It's been localized for many different languages. If we scroll down just a little further on the page here, we can see that there are some different examples, some featured websites using Flarum software. You can definitely check those out if you'd like to. They've got a blog down here. They've got some developer stuff for learning how to extend the Flarum software to add additional functionality. And you could actually contribute to their Docker container if you'd like to do that as well. We've got, it says down here, built with the best tools. We've got DigitalOcean, we've got GitHub, we've got KeyPass, I think is the one here, and some other stuff that honestly I'm not too terribly familiar with, but they are apparently using some of those services to build Flarum. And of course, they've got some additional links down here for verified communities, software networks, all kinds of good stuff on their website if you'd like to get more information about the background behind Flarum. So if we scroll back to the top, we can see there's an option to try it out or download it. We're going to go over here to the try out or the try it out button. I've actually already opened that over here and logged in. And basically this is what their demo forum looks like. We can see that there are lots of posts in here. We can see how many comments are in each one, the title, who started the post, when it was started, all kinds of good information in here. You can tag different posts for kind of categorization purposes if you wanted to do that. They've got a couple of tags of general and feedback direct. And of course, more information about Flarum, which version it is up here. And if we open one of these up, we can kind of see what, in fact, it looks like it dropped it down to the bottom, so we can see the most recent comment there first. And if we scroll up, we can get that entire thread of information, this conversation going back and forth between multiple people here. It looks like this is actually kind of a long one. We can click reply up here. Over here, we can see that there are 18 posts when the posts started, original post at the top. Then, of course, we can scroll down over here and select certain posts that we want to look at. Absolutely love the interface they've got going on here. Up at the top, we've got flagged post and notifications. Everybody who signs up for this should see notifications, but only moderators and administrators should see the flagged posts, just so that they can go in there and know that there's something that they need to deal with. If we come up to the top right where it says admin, there's an option for profile. And this would be obviously the administrator's profile. Posts, discussions, likes, mentions, all of that stuff is available from this one page, and I dig that. Of course, you can edit the profile from here. If we go to settings, over here, we can decide how we want to get things like notifications. Do you want to manage your privacy this way? Do you want to change your password, your email, those sorts of things? Now, the one thing I should say here is that over here, there are options to get email notifications. And the one thing that I will say about Linode is they have kind of locked down their services a little bit to kind of prevent spam on their system. So if you need to use an SMTP server, for example, You'll need to open a ticket with them to open the ports on your Linode so that you can use an SMTP server. It's just something they've done to help protect their server's integrity, to prevent spammers from spamming. So just know that you will need to open a ticket if you want to use SMTP to send notifications from your Flarum instance. And then, of course, we come back up to the top. We can come up to here and click on administration. And this is where we're going to see all kinds of different stuff here. The dashboard, we can kind of see, what version we're on for Flarum, PHP, MySQL, how many users, discussions, and posts. All of the different features that are currently available will be lit up, whereas the ones that are not available are kind of dimmed down. And the language pack that's installed here is English. We can go into basics and we can change the forum title, description. Do you want the homepage to be all discussions or specific tags? Of course, you can change the welcome banner like we saw over on the homepage here. This is the welcome banner right up there. And of course, the slug driver for how do you want the URLs to be structured? Do you want it to be a slug or do you want it to be UTF-8? I've seen different versions of this depending on which version of Flarum you're on. So this may look a little bit different when you deploy yours. Same thing for the driver. Do you want it to be the default like it shows here, or do you want it to be based on ID? So you can kind of change that to suit your needs. Our next option over here is email. And again, this is one of those things that if you decide you want to have notifications sent out via email that you would need to, and I don't think it's going to let me show this, you would again need to open a ticket to have those ports opened on your Linode. We will take a look at this at the email section when we get this deployed in just a few minutes. Permissions, we can have admins, mods, lurkers. We can set up groups for people and then set permissions for each of those groups globally. Absolutely love that. Over here on appearance, we can say, do we want dark mode? Do we want light mode by turning that off? I don't know if that's going to work. Save. Let's take a look there. Yep, there's light mode. Absolutely hate it. Nothing wrong with what they've done here. I just prefer dark mode for most everything. You can do a colored header if you wanted to do that. You can change the logo, the fave icon, the custom header. So any kind of HTML that you need displayed in the header for tracking purposes or social media sharing purposes, things like that, can go in the header or into the footer, or you can edit the CSS a little bit to tweak it however you like it to work, to change the aesthetic of the site. Next, we've got users, and here are all of the users. I didn't do this. They actually blurred that out, so I appreciate that. And next, we've got the extensions that are currently installed in Flarum, and you can see they're turned, if they're enabled, they're green. If they've got the red circle over here, it means they're disabled. If you wanted to, you could come in here, click nicknames, for instance, and enable that just like so. And that's how you can enable an extension. Of course, if you wanted to disable it just as quickly, go over there, click disabled, and now that particular extension is disabled. So there is both the front end and the back end of Flarum. So whether you're trying to build an internal tool for your teammates to collaborate on, or you're trying to build a community of your team and your clients or customers, I think Flarum is a great option to at least get started, to kind of get your feet wet using a forum system. And I think with all of that said, let's jump over and actually get Flarum installed on Linode. So I want to preface what we're about to do here with, I've already got my domain pointed to Linode. You'll want to go over to your domain registrar if you haven't already, and point your domain over to Linode's name servers. There's plenty of information available on what those are, but if you're not sure, we can actually come in here to domains, and I can just show you what this one looks like. And it's basically, you'll want to set up the following name servers wherever your domain is currently set up. You want to set up ns1 through ns5.linode.com. That's all you got to do is just point those from your current domain registrar over to Linode, and then wait a respectable amount of time. Different registrars will take a different amount of time to point the DNS records and actually have all of that propagate. So it may take 24 to 48 hours. I've had it happen almost instantly. It's really just going to depend on where you purchased your domain and where your domain is currently being managed. What we're going to want to do to get started on the Flarum installation process is actually come over here to the right where it says Create Linode. And then what we're going to do is come over here and click on Marketplace. We're going to kind of speed run through some of this because I don't want to manually install Docker and Docker Compose and all of that stuff. So we're just going to use a Linode instance that already has Docker set up and ready to go. So what we're going to do is come over here where it says Select an App and type in Docker. And right here, there is Docker and there is Yacht. Yacht is kind of a different version or different way to manage Docker, but we're just going to do the Docker app right here like so. If we scroll down just a little bit, we can see that there's a Docker setup section down here that says advanced options. Basically, if you wanted to, you could create a sudo. I hear lots of different back and forth on the pronunciation of that. You can create an additional user that has root privileges that is not root using this. I'm going to skip over that for right now, just because this is a demonstration, but you absolutely could, for security reasons, not use root and put in a username and a password here, and then disable root over SSH. That's completely up to you how you want to handle that, but for best security practices, that is probably the better way to go. Further down, we'll just keep scrolling, and we're going to select an image. I like to use Debian 11. It's the newest version that's out right now that is stable, so that's what we're going to use. The region, basically, this is where do you want your instance located geographically. I'm going to select Dallas, Texas, because of all the options that are available here. Dallas is the one closest to me, so I'm going to select that. And then down below here, we've got a Linode plan, whether it's a dedicated CPU or a shared CPU. Those are probably the two you'll want to select from, though there are high memory and GPU options available as well. I think I'm just going to do a shared CPU with like 2 gigs of RAM and 1 CPU, 50 gigs of storage, and 2 terabytes of transfer. Should be more than enough to get started and get familiar with how to deploy Flarum. So we're just going to go and select that. You can change the Docker label, or the Linode label rather. I'm going to call this Flarum-Docker. I'm not going to put any tags in. That's just something I don't need to do right now. I am going to put in a root password so I can log in via SSH as root. However, even if you had created a sudo or a sudo user above, you would still have to create a root user password. It's just part of the setup process. Additionally, if you had SSH keys set up on your system, you could import those here and log in without a password if you wanted to go that route. We're not going to do that either. We're not going to attach a VLAN. I highly recommend backups. That way, if something goes wrong, you can back up to a previous state and hopefully not lose too much information prior to needing said backup. You can also do a private IP if you want. That's up to you. I always do because it's free. So I'm going to go ahead and just scroll down and click on Create Linode. So here we can see that it is provisioning. It's going through its setup process. We can see the IP address both for IPv4 and IPv6. We've got some access over here via SSH or Lish console via SSH. You got some different options there. But while this is doing its thing and while it's coming up, because this will take a few minutes, basically, even once it says that it's up and running, you'll want to give it a few additional minutes to run some of the commands in the background to install Docker and Docker Compose and all of the setup processes for that. So while it's doing that, let's go over and get our domain configured as well as our subdomain. So what we're going to do is come over here and click on domains. I'm going to come up here and click on add or create a domain. My domain will be tutorialserver.xyz. Once we've got that set up, we're also going to set up a subdomain specifically for the forums. And then we're going to put in our email address. And then next it's asking, do you want to insert default records? Basically, do you want to have the system automatically point this domain to one of your Linodes? And for the sake of simplicity, I absolutely want to do that. So I'm going to insert default records from one of my Linodes. And then I'm going to select Flarum Docker. That's the one that we're building right now. And I'm going to click on Create Domain. So here are all of the records that it's built for us for our domain to point to our Linode instance. We've got a couple of options on how we could set up our subdomain of forum or forums.tutorialserver.xyz. We could set up an A record or a CNAME. I'm going to set up an A record just because it's just as easy in my opinion. So I'm going to copy the IP address there. I'm going to click on add an A record. And then up here, I'm going to type in forums. And then I'll put in the IP address and make sure that there are no additional spaces before or after the IP address. Make sure all of that looks good. And then we'll click on save. So now we can see that we've got our domain set up here on this IP address, as well as our subdomain of forums set up here on the same IP address. And that's all there is to configuring the domains that we're going to need for our Flarum setup. So now if we come over here to back up to the top where it says Linodes, we can see that Flarum Docker is running. We've got a Linode 2 gig here. We've got our IP address. We've got our region. And when our last backup was, this says scheduled. So that means it is configured. It just hasn't happened yet. So what we're going to do is click right here where it says Flarum Docker. And then we're going to come over to where it says SSH access and copy like that. Now we want to open a terminal window. I'm just going to type in terminal. You can use whatever your favorite terminal emulator is. I'm using Windows PowerShell. You can use PuTTY. You can use a command prompt. There are lots of options on how you can SSH into a server, but I'm just going to use the Windows PowerShell for this. Also, I'm going to minimize this window right here. And I'm going to just right click so that it will paste in SSH root at the IP address that I was provided via Linode. And this, you should only see this once. This is saying, hey, you've never connected to this server. Are you sure that's what you want to do? I am, so I'm going to type in yes and hit enter. And then it says, hey, we've permanently added that IP address to your hosts file, so let's go ahead and enter your password. And there we go. Now we are logged in. We're SSH'd into our new Linode as root. So what I want to do next is actually do Control-L to clear my screen. So the cool thing about Docker is that you can manage the whole thing through a command line if you like to do that. That is completely up to you. Or if you like to have a graphical user interface, some kind of a dashboard to log into and manage your Docker server, you can use a tool called Portainer. And that's the first thing that I want to install for our setup here. So I'm going to go ahead and run this command. So here we've got the Docker command that we're going to use in order to install Portainer. It basically says docker run -d, and that -d means that if we get this up and running and then close this terminal window, Portainer will keep running. If that -d wasn't there and we ran this, the Portainer instance would come up, but would immediately shut down once we close this window. So that's what the -d is for. Next, we've got a -p, and that's just saying ports, basically which ports do we want to run on. Port 9000 will be the port we use for accessing the user interface, and port 8000 is kind of the port that it uses in the background to do its thing. We're going to name it Portainer. We've got a restart policy of always, basically meaning if your server reboots or whatever, or there's an issue, whatever, Portainer will make every effort that it can to automatically come back up. Next, we've got a volume. That's what the -v is for, a var run docker.sock. And we've got, basically, we're mounting that to itself so that Portainer can connect to Docker and manage Docker. That's all that first volume is for, is just so that it can manage Docker. And below that, or next to that, rather, we've got a -v, another volume, so that we can store our Portainer data. Basically, this is what you would need to do that. We're using Portainer's Community Edition, the latest version of that. So what we'll do is just go ahead and hit enter. It says it can't find it, so it's going to go ahead and pull it, and then once it's done, Portainer will come up. So here we are just a few seconds later, and Portainer is up and running, and we can tell that if we do docker-p or space ps like so. Here we can see that Portainer is in fact up and running. It was created 15 seconds ago, and it's been up for all of 14 seconds. So with that said, now let's go over to get logged into Portainer in our browser. So what we're going to do is come back to our Linode here. I'm just going to copy the IP address that we have available right there. I'm going to open that in a new tab and add port 9000 to it like so. And it's saying, hey, this isn't secure. That's fair, it's not. So I'm going to go ahead and click on continue, and then it's going to ask me to create an administrator account. Please, please, please don't use admin. Change it to something else. Using admin is just a bad idea. So I'm going to change it, and then I'm going to put in my password twice just to make sure I don't screw it up. So once I've got that, you can decide whether or not you want to allow the collection of anonymous statistics so that Portainer can continue to develop their product and have good information about what's being done and how it's being used and that sort of thing. That's completely up to you. But I'm going to go ahead and click on create Portainer, create user in Portainer rather. And then the first thing that I like to do is actually come over to environments and click on local and put in the IP address. It's just a good practice to put in the IP address of your server there for later purposes, and I'll show you what that is. So I'm going to click update, and I'm going to click home, and then I'll just click right here in the middle of the page. Basically, we're just kind of navigating to get back to the dashboard that we need to get to in order to deploy our next set of steps. So here, if we click on container, we can see that Portainer is up and running. We can look at the logs. We can get more information or inspect it. We can look at stats. We can open a console, or we can attach a console to that. We can see the image being used when it was created, the internal IP address, whether or not it has a GPU attached to it, and again, the published ports. And like I said, if we take a look at port 9000 there, that's what that is for. If we hadn't changed the environment to be the IP address that we put in there, and we clicked this, then instead of being the IP address right here, it would just be 0.0.0.0 and wouldn't work. And that's why we want to change that environment as quickly as possible, just so we don't forget to do it later. So what we want to do next is actually come over here to stacks. Portainer uses the name stacks instead of Docker Compose. I'm not exactly sure what the rationale is for that, but basically, Docker compose in Docker translates to stacks in portainer. So just know that those two words in this particular instance are kind of synonymous. So what we're going to do, like I said, we've clicked on stacks. We're going to come up to the top right and click on add a stack. And we're going to give this a name. We're going to call this Flarum. Oops. Like so, if my fingers would work. Anyway, so what we want to do next is open up a stack here, a Docker compose that I built out specifically for this video. And I'm going to paste this in here, and then we're going to talk about it. So we're going to scroll up to the top. This is a version 3 Docker compose. Basically, different versions of Docker compose will have different features and functionality available to them. Version 3 is perfectly acceptable for what we're doing here. Below that, it's got a services line. Basically, we're going to put all of the services that we're going to use in our Docker compose below that. We've got a few different services. I'm actually going to change this to be npm. Basically, Nginx proxy manager will be the reverse proxy that we're going to use to route some traffic on our Linode, as well as handle all of our SSLs so that we can make sure that we've got those SSLs in place for when people access our domain. Below that, we've got a restart policy of unless stopped. That is also perfectly acceptable. If your server goes down, reboots, whatever, it will automatically try to come back up unless you have manually gone in and stopped that container. If you've done that, and then if you've stopped a container and then your server reboots, that container will not automatically come back up. I think actually, now that I've said that out loud, I'm going to change this to always, because we always want Nginx proxy manager to be up to route our traffic on our system. Below that, again, we've got ports like we talked about a moment ago with portainer. This one uses 3 ports instead of 2. Basically, it's going to use ports 80 and 443 for our insecure and secure traffic, respectively. And then port 81 will be the port that will access the dashboard of Nginx Proxy Manager on. Below that, we've got some volumes for where do we want to store our Nginx Proxy Manager data and our Let's Encrypt SSL data. All of those have been mapped there. You can change these to be basically wherever you'd like on your server. However, don't change the colon or anything after it. That is where the container has been programmed to look for certain resources. So don't change the colon here or anything after it anywhere in any of this Docker compose. And then below that, we've got a network. Basically, we want all of these containers to be on the same network so that they can more easily communicate with each other. We've declared that network right here. So next, we've got our Flarum container set up down here with the host name of Flarum, the image that we're going to use, the container name, and some environment variables for like debug, for our forum URL, for our database host, our database name, our user, our password, and our database prefix. Now, it's important that you, at the very minimum, change this password. That is just a default password that I've got in there for the sake of this tutorial. Please change that. Below that, we've got a database port. 3306 is a very standard port for a MySQL or Maria database to run on. So that's what's going on there. And then we've got an admin user, password, email, and title that you can also adjust as you see fit. You will be asked for this again later, so I don't actually even know if this stuff right here is necessary, but it's there just in case. So below that, we've got some volumes for Flarum, and here we've got home Docker, Flarum assets, and extensions and storage and Nginx. You can change everything on the left side of the colon, but again, don't change anything over here on the right side of the colon there. Below that, we've got ports of 88, 68, and 8888. This was originally 8888, and it's fine. But again, change only the stuff on the left side of the colon there. We're going to make it dependent on the Maria database, basically the database that's going to store everything. We want to make sure that that Maria database is up and running before our Flarum instance tries to do anything. And then again, we're mapping this to the Nginx proxy manager _ default network. So if we scroll down a little bit further here, we've got our Maria database. Again, that's where all of our information is going to get stored. We've got our image there. We've got our container name. Again, we've got some environment variables for the root password, the database, the user, the password. Make sure that if you change anything up here in the Flarum image or the Flarum container, that it matches down here as well. But please, please, please change at the very minimum where it says, this X over and over and over again for both the root password and the MySQL password. Again, we've got a volume mapped for the database. Again, only change the stuff on the left side, not on the right side of that colon there. And we're mapping this again to that Nginx proxy manager _ default network. And then down here at the bottom, we're declaring that network so that portainer can tell Docker to create that network. So that's all we've got going on here. Once we're happy with all of this, we should be able to scroll down and click on deploy the stack. And as long as we don't get an error message up here in the top right-hand corner, we'll just give it a few minutes to do its thing, and then we'll come back and take a look. Okay, so here we are just a couple of minutes later, and we can see that Flarum has been deployed right here. If we click this, we'll be able to see all of the containers that we deployed under here, including Flarum, the Nginx proxy manager, as well as the Maria database. Here we've got a running state on all of those, and we can actually take a look at the logs for each of these. And here we can see that it is... the forum is starting. Initially, it said, hey, we can't connect to the database. And it's like, oh, hey, now we can. So now it's going to go through the process of starting the forum software. So we just kind of need to hang out and be patient while that does its thing. So we'll go ahead and just let this do its thing. But while it's doing its thing, let's go ahead and take a look over here so that we can see that Nginx Proxy Manager is up and running. All of its tasks have completed in the background. And if we take a look at the Maria database over here, we can see that it is ready for connections down here at the bottom. So again, what we need to do is just kind of hang out and wait, and then we can come back and actually go through the installation process and the setup process for both the domain name and the SSL, as well as the forums themselves. So while we're waiting for that to do its thing, let's actually jump over to Nginx Proxy Manager, get our account set up there, and then actually start getting set up to pull our SSL and get our domain configured. So what we're going to do is come over here to where it says Flarum npm1, scroll over to where it says port 81, and click right there. It's going to ask us to log in. Now, if you're not sure what the login is for this, we go to Nginx Proxy Manager and click on Get Started, and scroll down. Right here is the email and password for the default user. We're going to go ahead and copy and paste those in, but once we do that, it's going to ask us to change our username and password. So let's go ahead and do that now. Oops, go ahead and copy the password and paste that in. Click sign in. And then again, like I said, it's going to ask us to change that. So I'm going to do that like so. And then I'm going to put in our current password and our new password and click save. Cool, so now our user has been created. So what we want to do next is actually come over here, click hosts and click proxy host. And then we're going to add a proxy host. So basically your proxy host is just going to be your domain name, right? So what we're going to do is type in forum.tutorialserver.xyz, like so. And of course, you'll put in your subdomain and or domain, whatever you want to do for your configuration. This is just the one that we configured a moment ago over on Linode. So below that, we're going to select HTTP. There are other options like HTTPS, but because Flarum doesn't have an SSL built into it, we're just going to use HTTP here. For our forward to hostname /IP, what we want to do is actually go back to portainer, and look for Flarum right here, and then come over and find the IP address right there. And we're going to click copy, and then we're going to, we're going to close that, and we're going to put that in for the IP address there. Again, making sure that there are no spaces before or after. And then the forward port, what we want to do, the next thing we want to do is add the forward port to this. If we come back to portainer, we can see that we've got 8888 on both the left and the right side. Now, because we've got all of these on the same Docker network, we actually want to use the port over here on the right. This, again, they're the same on this one, but if you would say change it to 8868 on the left side and it was 8888 on the right side, you would still use the 8888 for the Docker port itself. So that's what we're going to use here. I'm going to paste that in there. We want to cache assets and WebSocket support and block common exploits. All of that is perfectly acceptable for what we're doing here. The next thing we want to do is come over and request a new SSL certificate. We want to force the SSL. We can do HSTS enabled. Basically, all of these are going to force that SSL and prevent any manner of getting around that. So there's no chance that you could go to HTTP forum.tutorialserver.xyz. It's not going to let you do that. So the next thing we can do is say, I agree. Of course, make sure that you read those terms before you agree, and then click save. So if you get something like this that says internal error, the first thing you want to do is actually go back over to your domain setup and make sure that you didn't mess that up like I did. So I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to click cancel, refresh just to make sure there's nothing there. I'm going to delete this like so. Just to make sure that we start over correctly this time. And I'm going to type in forums.tutorialserver, like so. Whereas, again, I typed in forum last time, and that was wrong. So we're going to do HTTP. We're going to put that in. All of the other stuff is still the same. So we're just going to check all of those boxes again. And click save. And there we go. So that is how we fix that particular error in most cases. So with this up and running here, what we're going to do is just click right there. And there we go. Now we can install our forum. So we're going to call this Flarum Linode. And then my MySQL host, our brain wants to say that localhost is going to be fine, but just to make sure that we don't mess that up, what we actually want to do is come over here and we're going to want to grab the service name that we used in our Docker Compose over here. This effectively becomes the host name that we want to use. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste that in right there. Our database name, again, we're going to kind of do some copying and pasting here. Our database is Flarum. We're going to paste that in there. Our user name, again, is going to be Flarum. Back over. Our MySQL password, in this case, is all those X's. Again, please change that. And then for, I know there was something else. The table prefix, that's the one we wanted. So we're going to come up here and just do this Flarum underscore, like so. So then we're going to go ahead and put in our admin username, our password, our email, all that kind of stuff. And then click Install Flarum. So we'll go ahead and let this kind of do its thing in the background. And there we go. Just that quickly and easily, we've got our forums installed. So what we can do next is we're logged in automatically as the administrative user. What I like to do, of course, is go over here to the administration section. We're going to go to Appearance, and I'm going to set this to dark and click Save. So much better. I can't tell you how much better I feel about that already. So at this point, now you can go in and you can, set up your title, your description. You can set up tags, or you can set up how you want your homepage to be displayed, whether it's, again, all discussions or specific tags. You can change your banner. Again, that banner is this area right here. Let's refresh that to get into dark mode. And again, you can set up your email. Again, if you want to use SMTP for your notifications, you will want to make sure that you put in a request to have those ports opened on your Linode. Submit that support request to Linode, and then you can use SMTP if you wanted to do that. Again, permissions, you can set up different groups of users who can come in and do different things, and you can set those group permissions globally. Again, we looked at this, but we can change the colors that we want to use for highlights and that sort of thing. We can see the users that are available here. And then the next thing we can do is actually come down here and enable or disable any of the features that we need for our particular setup. So guys, that's how easy it is to get Flarum set up on Linode with a domain name, with an SSL, with a subdomain, the whole bit. I feel like this is kind of a quick and easy way to get this set up. And of course, I would love to hear from you guys in the comment section down below. And I will have, again, links to resources for everything in the description, including a link to jump over to Linode to get $100 in free credit to check them out for 60 days. But with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I do want to thank you guys for spending a few minutes of your day with me today, and I'll talk to you in the next video.